what I expect to be a quick video on some more physical media. These are just some movies I've watched recently and I thought I would talk about briefly. One is the French film, and I'm going to try not to get all the glare in the world. The French film Donkey Skin, not Donkey Skin, that's something else. Donkey Skin with Catherine Deneuve. It's directed by Jacques Demy, I can't speak French, who I believe directed the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, sure, which is pretty fun. Anyway, this is oddly it does have songs, but it's hard to really call it a musical necessarily. But it's a cool little fantasy tale. It's got the very it's not Brothers Grimm, but it has that Brothers Grimm feel to it. It's light, but also deals with some really appalling. The core concept is really quite awful, but that's so kind of typical of fairy tales. Anyway, I thought it would be good inspiration for like Ars Magica or something else that might use fairy tales for inspiration. The magic item that she gets, the sort of the donkey skin that she wears that allows her to appear to be like a peasant and everything, that's kind of interesting. There's I don't know, there's a bunch of different odd things in it that make it an interesting watch. And this is the first time I think, I've seen a few Catherine Deneuve films over the years, and I know that, she's another one of those French actresses that people went bananas for. And especially actresses, I feel like from the 60s and 70s, like the French actresses, I always heard people, when I was growing up, be like, oh my goodness, oh, they're so wonderful. And I never really got it. This is the first time where I was actually watching. I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of see something about this Catherine Deneuve person. She really does have something. And I've seen a bunch of her movies. Anyway, but I thought she was really quite good in this. And anyway, I thought it was interesting. Sticking with France and the Middle Ages, I also watched this one. I am never going to say that correctly, but it is, I think the English title of it is The Devil's Envoys. This is 1942, directed by Marcel Carnet, if I'm saying that at all right. Again, apologies, my French is really bad. This is 1942. It was made, basically under the Nazis, and supposedly Carne, and apologies, was sort of doing subversive work. I will fully admit that if this has commentary on that sort of thing, I did not pick up on it. I'm sure there's stuff in there. I could kind of tell watching the film that it was making references or that it was saying things, and I was not getting it. I don't know enough about the area, the time, the history, all of that sort of thing. So, beyond the broad strokes of World War II, I don't really know a lot about Nazi-occupied Paris. There's that scene in Casablanca, and that's about mostly what I know. So anyway, I don't get the sort of cultural stuff from the time, but it was still a really interesting movie. This is a Criterion edition of it, so obviously it's going to come with some specials. It has this booklet in here with a little a write-up by Michael Atkinson, still from the movie. This, again, I think would make cool, we'll think about the transfer, I think would make cool inspiration for Ars Magica. I think it has some sort of obvious stuff for Ars Magica, especially, the setting and some of the characters involved and that sort of thing. But also just generally the sort of weird vibe. It doesn't feel necessarily accurate to the Middle Ages. It feels very much like a 1940s Hollywood film. Actually, it's shot in a way that reminds me of other films coming out of the Hollywood industry at the time. But yeah, anyhow, I don't know. I thought it was a pretty cool movie. I thought it had a good story. And I actually think this would be an interesting companion piece to the Seventh Seal, Seventh Sign, Seventh Sign. Anyway, the Max von Sydow movie. I think it would be a good. I always get confused Seventh Sign and Seventh Seal. Um, it's not the Jürgen Prochnow film. Anyway, boy, really rambling today, and you can tell I did not go and prepare right ahead of time. Also, then watched John Adams. This is a miniseries from HBO. Cool story, great performance from Paul Giamatti, and actually just generally across the board, some great performances. The direction, and I know that it's sort of become a joke now post, oh gosh, what was that horrible musical? Les Mis, after the Les Mis adaptation, and then the apocalyptic, I'm not going to say it's why COVID happened, but I'm not going to say it's not, Cats, that Tom Hooper is, like if he could shoot movies with the camera set on people's belly buttons and I mean, just the close-ups and Dutch angles in this film are ridiculous. Battlefield Earth, like Battlefield Earth does not have as many Dutch angles as this film does. So what I'm saying is, I think the direction and cinematography are actually kind of awful, but everything else in it is really good. It's a very strange, very interesting portrayal of Thomas Jefferson in this, where he is. You kind of think because of where the American right and a certain element of the pseudo agrarian society that has remained, or the people who fantasize about being medieval lords and that sort of thing, who really, I think, come out of Jeffersonian politics, are the sort of stuffy, whatever. But he's portrayed in this as this sort of like intellectual elite, almost bordering on like communist revolutionary. It's really sort of fascinating the way he is portrayed. Um, it's also got like a very interesting look at the dynamic between Washington and um, everyone, really, but Washington and Hamilton and Adams and Jefferson. So, yeah, I think well worth a watch if you can sit through the seasickness inducing cinematography, where it's just like, guys, you spent so much money on this film, you couldn't buy a tripod. Like, come on. Uh, anyway, but John Adams, worth watching. I don't have any particular gaming inspiration that I took from this necessarily, although I think you could fairly easily. I've never really looked at a Revolutionary War era set RPG, and I know there's a couple out there, but I think that as I learn more about the time, I've said before, but U.S. history was never my strength. I got the history bug from an early age, but I was really into ancient history, prehistory, ancient history. Really, honestly, once the Romans roll around is when I started to tune out. I wasn't usually that interested in the Roman era and later. And as time has gone on, my interests have spread out and sort of branched out into different places. I'm much more interested in medieval history, especially parts of the world outside of France, Germany, and England. Um, I'm much more interested in pre-Columbian American history than I used to be. And then into the Age of Sail and all of that sort of thing. And I started to just get more fascinated by the connections between things. So seeing all of the things that are rooted in the actions of the Mongols, seeing all of the things that changed because of a certain trade item or what have you. Things like a fish sauce in Southeast Asia evolving into, what is it, Worcestershire sauce or Worcester? I don't speak British. Um, or is that, no, I'm sorry. It's the fish sauce in Southeast Asia evolving into ketchup. It's the fish sauce in Rome evolving into Worcestershire, whatever sauce. I think that's the correct. It was both fish sauces, two different places, are modern condiments that don't have fish in them. Anyway, so as time has gone on, I am more interested in the Revolutionary era and uh, its connections to other world events. Even watching this series, now having actually been to Versailles, Versailles. But it reminded me of a movie that I watched years and years and years ago, a French film called Ridicule, which is set obviously in France, but it's set in this time period ish. I want to say it's pre-revolution, but I can't remember. I feel like the court that Adams goes to is roughly the same era, although it may be a decade or so off. Anyway, it just put me in thought of some of that sort of thing, and again these connections. And after going to Versailles, and I know that there are other reasons and other things that led to the revolution in France, but I I stood in the workers' neighborhood, and we had lunch at a cafe, and it was in what had been where the workers lived and did a lot of their work. And you can just walk out the front door and look up the road, and you're looking at Versailles. And Versailles is it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous in two ways. It's ridiculous in that it's just a rampant display of genuinely offensive wealth, and it's just standing there so you can look at it when you don't have enough food to eat. I would have, I'm not going to use expletives, but I would probably have gone up there and burned that place to the ground if I had been a worker in the 1700s. Because I kind of felt like doing it being a worker now, and but it's also ridiculous for the other reason of that. And this is something that I think is true of many European palaces. I've now been to a whole bunch of European palaces, and it was really Versailles that kind of like pushed me over the edge. It's tacky and it's ugly, and it reminds me, actually, speaking of this era, when you go to some of the revolutionary, the founding fathers and stuff, and their houses, and you start to see now that they're really doing a lot of historical restoration, and they're finding the original colors and things like that, and you look at the stuff and it's tacky and it's ugly, and it's because it's expensive. Like, why did Washington paint the walls of his house the color he painted them? It wasn't because they look good. They didn't. It was because that color was expensive, and so it made it look expensive. And when you go to Versailles, that's what it is. It's tacky and ugly. It's floor to ceiling paintings of ugly inbred European royalty. It is everything is like gold filigreed to the point where it stops being an accent and starts just becoming garish. That's what I just really, and I'm not a minimalist by any stretch of the imagination. I am not a minimalist, but that's maximalist to a point where it is just ugly and tacky and in bad taste. And that's what I have found about European palaces, generally speaking. They might have you could go into a room, and if you could take out 80% of the junk that is in there, junk that probably would fetch ridiculous prices on the market, but if you took out 80% of the junk that is in that room and rearranged things and spaced them out and gave your eyes somewhere to rest and maybe painted the walls a color that doesn't make your eyes bleed, then you would have a really beautiful room, an ornate and beautiful room that actually looks classy and dignified, instead of these just ugly, garish, crowded, just whatever rooms. So I would have burned those places down if I'd had the chance to, because screw those people. So I kind of understand, Anyway, a little bit of revolutionary flair after you visit the palaces of Europe. I kind of get it. Not to say we don't have, not to say we haven't re-embraced it, because there's a lot of people in the States that seem to want monarchy again. But anyhow, I thought it was very cool. It's an interesting series, worth watching. Some food for thought. Inspirational games? I don't know, maybe. And I kind of would like to try a Revolutionary War era game. I don't know which one to try. Have you tried one? Oh, look, I'm going to look for some engagement in the comments below. Have you tried a Revolutionary War era game? Which one? What did you think of it? What sort of stories do you tell? If you enjoy this at all, check the links below. Gosh, I'm recording this in early August. This is probably not going to post until maybe November. I at this point, I may not even be in this apartment at that point. We'll see. There may be a new backdrop in videos at some point coming up. I don't know what the future is going to bring right now, but there's going to be some changes a-coming. So anyhow, until whatever the next video is, because at the time I'm recording this, I got no idea. Uh, uh, like, comment, subscribe if you feel like it. Take care.